Jake had always been a man of simple needs: peace, stability, and a chance to escape his past. After years of working in various jobs across the galaxy, he found himself at a crossroads. The noise of his past life, the constant battles, and the stress of being a soldier had drained him. Now in his early 30s, he sought something more. That something came in the form of an unexpected job offer. Jake had been hired as the personal caretaker for none other than Princess Rilana of Karanos, a peaceful planet located far from the conflicts he knew too well. The job was high profile, paying well enough to secure his future for years to come. But Jake wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. It wasn't every day a man like him got hired to serve a royal, especially not an alien princess. But the offer came, and with no other options in sight, Jake accepted. The embassy was clear about one thing: this wasn't just any princess. Rilana was known for her beauty, her intellect, and most of all, her strong will. The assignment came with clear instructions: ensure her comfort, maintain her health, and assist with anything she needed. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he boarded the ship that would take him to Karanos. He had done his research, and he knew Karanos was a rich, fertile world, known for its advanced technologies and serene landscapes. It was a world of peace, one he thought he could get used to. The moment Jake landed on Karanos, he felt the weight of the assignment settle into him. The palace was magnificent, towering above the city with gold-tinted windows and shimmering domes. It felt like he was stepping into another world, one of royal grandeur and unimaginable power. As he passed through the gates, the silence of the place almost overwhelmed him. But despite the serene atmosphere, Jake couldn't help but feel a little nervous. There were rumors about Princess Rilana, whispers that she was difficult, cold, and often dismissive of the caretakers who served her. Most of them didn't last long. That thought made Jake uneasy, but he couldn't afford to back out now. He was met at the palace by a guide, a tall, regal woman with piercing blue eyes. She was dressed in elegant silver attire, her posture straight and dignified. "Welcome to Karanos, Mr. Jake," she said, her voice calm and formal. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Thank you," Jake replied, though his mind was racing. He had never been this close to royalty, and he wasn't sure what to expect. The guide led him through long, winding corridors, their steps echoing in the grand hallways. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and paintings of historical battles, victories, and great leaders. It all seemed too much, too polished, but soon enough they arrived at a large, ornate door. "This is Her Highness's private chambers," the guide said. "You will report directly to her from now on. I trust you'll understand the importance of discretion and respect. She is not one for pleasantries." With that, the guide knocked on the door and waited for a response. A soft voice, smooth and slightly cold, called out from within, "Enter." The guide opened the door and stepped aside, allowing Jake to walk in. The room was stunning, with large windows overlooking the expansive gardens below. Princess Rilana sat by a desk, reading something on a tablet. She was as stunning as the stories had said, her silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall, her skin pale and smooth. But her eyes, those piercing violet eyes, were what captivated Jake the most. They seemed to look right through him, as if she could see every flaw, every fear, every thought. "Mr. Jake, I presume?" she asked without looking up from her tablet. Her voice was cool, controlled, and had a certain edge to it. "Yes, Your Highness," Jake responded, trying to keep his voice steady. She finally looked up, studying him for a moment. There was no warmth in her gaze, just the quiet scrutiny of someone who had grown used to power and control. "Good. I trust the embassy explained the nature of your duties?" Rilana asked, her tone matter-of-fact. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm here to assist you with anything you need to ensure your comfort and well-being," Jake replied, his heart racing a little. It was a simple job, or so he thought, but standing before her made everything feel more complicated. Rilana nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Very well. I expect you to be efficient. I don't have time for idle chatter or unnecessary delays. There are no second chances here." Jake swallowed, but he nodded. "Understood, Your Highness." "Good," she said simply, returning her attention to her tablet. "You may leave now. I will call for you when I require something." Jake stood there for a moment, unsure if he should leave or say something more. But when Rilana didn't look up, he knew there was nothing more to be said. He gave a quick nod and turned to leave. As he stepped out of her chambers, the door closed behind him with a soft click, and he exhaled deeply. He was sure he had just experienced the coldest reception ever given to a new employee. Jake spent the next few days adjusting to life in the palace, following the same routine each day, waking up early, tending to Rilana's needs, ensuring everything was in order. But no matter how much he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Rylana never opened up to him, never even showed a hint of appreciation for his efforts. She was distant, cold even, and though she was polite, it was clear she wasn't particularly interested in forming any kind of relationship with him. One evening, as Jake was preparing her evening meal, he overheard some of the palace staff whispering in the hallways. They spoke of the many caretakers who had failed before him, the men who couldn't handle the princess's high standards or harsh ways. Some even said that no one could stay in her service for long. Jake shook his head. It didn't make sense. Why would the royal family hire someone only to drive them away? Surely there was more to it than just her difficult personality. As the days passed, Jake started to wonder if he was up for the task. Could he last in a job where the stakes were so high and the reward so distant? Little did he know the real challenge was just beginning. Rylana's harshness was a shield, and it would take more than a simple caretaker to break through it. Jake had been working in the palace for a few weeks now, and though he had gotten used to the grandeur of his surroundings, he still couldn't shake the feeling of unease whenever he was in Princess Rylana's presence. She was a mystery to him. Her cold demeanor seemed to make her almost untouchable, and her royal status only added to the distance between them. He had spent his days cleaning, organizing and running errands for her, trying to prove his worth. But no matter how hard he tried, Rylana never seemed to notice. She gave him no praise, no acknowledgement, just cold orders and an even colder silence when her commands were carried out. That night, after another long day, Jake sat in his small quarters, a simple room furnished with only the basics. He stared at the wall, wondering if he had made the right choice in accepting this job. The pay was good, yes, but at what cost? He was starting to feel like a mere servant in her eyes, not someone worthy of even a glance. It was then that he heard a soft knock on his door. He was surprised. It was rare for anyone to come to his quarters, especially the princess. With a sense of curiosity, he stood and opened it. Standing in the doorway was a palace servant, a young woman with a slightly worried look on her face. "Mr. Jake," she said, her voice soft. "The princess has requested your presence. She wants you to join her for dinner tonight." Jake was stunned. This was the first time Rylana had asked for him personally, and his heart skipped a beat. Was this a chance to finally prove himself? Or was it simply another test, a way to see if he could live up to her expectations? "I'll be there," he said, nodding to the servant. The woman smiled and left, and Jake quickly made his way to the grand dining hall. He didn't know what to expect, but he hoped this would be the beginning of a new chapter in his service to the princess. When he entered the dining hall, the atmosphere was different. The large, elegant room, usually filled with the sounds of the royal staff, was now quiet, almost eerily so. At the head of the long table, Rylana sat alone. Her posture was regal, but there was something else in her eyes, something that seemed less cold, more vulnerable. She looked up as Jake approached, but her expression didn't soften. "You're late," she said with a flicker of irritation in her voice. "I'm sorry, Your Highness," Jake replied quickly, bowing slightly. I didn't expect your invitation." Rylana motioned to the empty seat across from her. "Sit. I didn't call you here for pleasantries. I need you to listen carefully." Jake took his seat, unsure of what was coming. He had learned not to expect anything easy with Rylana, but he was still surprised by the directness in her tone. "You're probably wondering why I've been so distant," she continued, her voice calmer now. "Most caretakers can't handle it. They leave the moment they realize how difficult I can be. They think I'm cruel or ungrateful, but you've stuck around, and that's unusual." Jake said nothing, not sure how to respond. He simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. "The truth is," she went on, looking away for a moment, "I've been hurt before. People who were supposed to care for me, they betrayed me, left me when things got tough, and so I built walls around myself. I've always kept people at arm's length." Jake's heart softened. He hadn't expected such a confession. Rylana, the cold and distant princess, was struggling with her own fears and pain. "But that doesn't excuse my behavior," she added, her voice quieter now. "I've pushed everyone away, and I need to know if you can be different. If you can handle what I require." Jake felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just about performing his duties. It was about proving himself worthy of her trust. He had to decide whether he would step up and become more than just a servant. Would he allow her walls to remain intact, or would he be the one to break through them? "I'll do my best, Your Highness," Jake said, his voice firm with resolve. He knew that this was his chance to prove that he wasn't like the others. He didn't plan on leaving. Not yet. Raylana nodded, and for the first time Jake saw a small, almost imperceptible smile tug at the corner of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. The rest of the evening passed in a strange, tense silence. Jake did his best to keep the conversation light, though Raylana only responded in short, clipped sentences. But for once he felt as though he was being seen, not as a servant, but as someone who had earned a bit of her attention. Later that night, Jake returned to his quarters, his mind buzzing with what had transpired. He hadn't expected Raylana to open up, but he felt that something had shifted. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Raylana's test was far from over. The next morning, things felt different. The usual routine resumed, but this time Jake noticed that Raylana seemed to watch him more closely. She no longer gave him the cold, dismissive treatment he had grown used to. Instead, she seemed to be assessing him, measuring his every action. As the days passed, Jake realized that Raylana wasn't simply testing his ability to perform his duties. She was testing his character. She needed to know if he could withstand the weight of her expectations and her pain. She was giving him a chance, but it was up to him to prove he was worthy of her trust. And so Jake did everything in his power to show her he was different. He worked harder, paid attention to her smallest needs, and remained calm in the face of her sometimes unpredictable moods. But no matter how hard he tried, he knew there was more to Raylana's behavior than just coldness. There was a depth to her that he hadn't yet begun to understand. Jake's challenge had only just begun. Raylana's trust was not easily won, and as the days wore on, he would soon discover that the true test wasn't just about doing his job well. It was about finding a way to reach the princess hidden behind her royal armor. The days that followed were filled with more tests, more challenges. Jake had been doing his best to understand Princess Raylana, but it wasn't easy. She had a way of keeping people at arm's length, even those who tried to get close. But Jake noticed something had changed. The coldness in her eyes wasn't as sharp anymore. There was a flicker of something deeper, something he couldn't quite place. One afternoon, as Jake was walking down one of the palace's grand corridors, he overheard a conversation between two palace servants. They spoke in hushed tones, but Jake caught a few words that made his heart race. Not many know, but the princess is being forced into a political marriage. It's the only way to save her family's throne. "Are you sure?" the other servant whispered. "I thought she had no intention of marrying anyone. I heard it from one of the royal advisors. She's trapped, forced to marry someone she doesn't love. The family needs her to do it. For the sake of the kingdom." Jake stood still for a moment, his mind whirling. Raylana, the proud princess who had always seemed so untouchable, was trapped by her own duty. He felt a pang of sympathy for her. But there was more. He had seen the look in her eyes, like she was running out of time, a prisoner to something beyond her control. The next day, Jake was summoned to the princess's private chambers again. His heart pounded as he entered the room, unsure of what to expect. "Jake, sit," Raylana commanded, her voice less cold than usual. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the vast gardens below. For a moment she didn't speak, lost in thought. He sat down across from her, waiting for her to say something. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, but Jake didn't mind. He had learned to read her silence. It was a form of communication in itself. Finally, Raylana turned to face him, her violet eyes softer than before. "I've been told I must marry soon," she said quietly. "The council has decided it's time. I am to marry for the good of my people. It's not a choice I wanted, but it's a duty I must fulfill." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. It was everything the servants had whispered about. Raylana, the fierce and proud princess, was being forced into something she didn't want. His heart went out to her, and for the first time he felt the weight of her isolation. "Who is it?" Jake asked softly, though he already had a sinking feeling in his chest. Raylana hesitated, her lips pressed together as though she didn't want to answer. But after a long pause, she spoke. "A man from one of the most powerful families on Koranos. He's suitable, but we have no bond. He doesn't care for me and I don't care for him. It's a political marriage, nothing more. Jake's heart ached as he listened. This was the reality of her life, a life where love didn't matter. She had to give up her own happiness for the sake of her people. Princess, Jake began, choosing his words carefully. I know this must be difficult, but you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry the weight of your duty all by yourself. Rylana's eyes flickered at his words, but she didn't say anything. She merely stood up and walked over to the window again, gazing out into the vast horizon as if searching for something beyond the palace walls. You don't understand, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I have no choice. It's the way things work here. I can't be weak. I can't be seen as vulnerable. A princess doesn't have the luxury of choosing her own happiness. Jake felt a sudden surge of emotion. He knew this was more than just about the marriage. Rylana was afraid of what would happen if she allowed herself to care for someone. Afraid that if she did, she would lose everything. He stood and walked over to her, standing beside her at the window. He didn't speak, just let the moments stretch between them. He could feel the weight of her uncertainty, her fear, and the growing bond between them. It was like something that couldn't be ignored any longer. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, Jake said, but I do know this. No one should have to sacrifice their happiness just because of tradition or duty. Not even you. Rylana turned to look at him then, her face a mixture of surprise and something else, something that almost looked like hope. But it was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. You can't possibly understand, she said, her voice tight. You're a caretaker. A servant. You're not part of this world and you'll never be part of it. Jake took a step closer. Maybe not. But I'm here, and I care about you, Rylana, more than just as your caretaker. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Rylana's gaze softened. She looked at him with a vulnerability she had never shown before. And that was when Jake realized it wasn't just about the job anymore. He had become part of her life in a way that she hadn't expected. And for the first time, Rylana seemed to see it too. She took a deep breath and looked away. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know who I am anymore. My life has been planned for me since birth, and now I feel like I'm drowning. Jake reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You're not drowning, Rylana. You're living. And you deserve to have a life that's yours. No one should decide that for you. Rylana's eyes were wet now, though she quickly blinked away the tears. She looked down at their joined hands, her voice barely audible as she spoke. But if I run away, if I fight against what they want for me, I'll lose everything. My family, my title, my people. You won't lose everything, Jake said firmly. Because you're not alone. You have me. And I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Rylana looked up at him, her gaze steady for the first time. Together? She asked, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Jake nodded. Yes, together. And for the first time in a long time, Rylana allowed herself to believe it.